All right, so are you ready to dive deep today? We're going to tackle decision-making, but get this through the lens of poker strategy.
Okay.
I know, right? You might be thinking, what does poker have to do with my everyday life? But honestly, the insights that we're going to uncover today from this article, lessons from poker, decision-making in life and business are surprisingly relevant.
Yeah, it's kind of wild how the strategies that make a winning poker player can apply to so many things.
Exactly.
Running a business, navigating relationships, even just making those daily choices.
Totally. And the article really brings this home with a story right at the beginning.
Okay.
The author describes this moment at the World Series of Poker where he's holding pocket aces,
Oh, wow.
the best possible hand, right? You think guaranteed win.
Yeah, you'd think so, right?
Right.
But
Yeah.
in poker, just like life, there's always that element of uncertainty.
Oh, for sure.
Even with a strong hand, there are all these factors you can't control.
Absolutely.
Unexpected moves from your opponents can totally change the game.
Exactly. And that's what happened in this story.
Oh.
The author's opponent made this play that threw him off, and it forced him to make a really tough decision.
I see.
And that brings us to the first big lesson. Understanding what information actually matters.
Oh, that's huge, right? Because in any decision, we're bombarded with information.
So much.
Useful stuff, useless stuff, just noise everywhere.
Right.
The key is to filter out those distractions and focus on the data that actually moves the needle.
And the article gives some good examples, like think about an athlete in the middle of a game.
Right.
They have to be so laser focused on their opponent's moves while tuning out the crowd, the noise, everything.
Yeah, anticipating the next play with all that going on.
Totally. Or a teacher trying to figure out if their students are actually getting it. They
Yeah.
have to read all those little cues like facial expressions and body language.
It's subtle.
It's very subtle,
To adjust their teaching in real time.
right on the fly.
And in business, CEOs constantly analyzing market trends, trying to stay ahead of those regulatory changes. It's a complex web of factors.
It really is.
And you got to identify those key pieces of information.
Right. The ones that will lead to the best outcome.
Exactly.
So how does this translate to the poker table? What are some of the things that a player needs to be aware of?
Well, one of the most important factors is something called stack size.
Stack size.
Yeah, this refers to how many chips each player has left.
Okay.
Knowing that can really give you insight into their strategy and how much risk they're willing to take.
So if a player has a large stack, they might be more willing to make bigger bets,
Exactly.
be more aggressive. But if they're running low, they might be more cautious.
It's like understanding a company's financial resources before you make a deal, you know?
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Yeah, you need to know what leverage they have and how much they're willing to gamble.
And then there's position. I'm guessing that's not just about where you sit at the table.
No, it's much more strategic than that.
Okay.
Position refers to the order in which players act during a hand. Being in a later position gives you an advantage because you get to see what your opponents do before making your own decision.
So you have more information to work with.
Exactly.
Kind of like how in a negotiation, you might want to wait for the other person to make the first offer.
Precisely.
So you can kind of get a sense of where they stand.
Yep. And then there are those famous tells that poker players are always watching for.
The tells.
Those subtle changes in body language, facial expressions, even betting patterns that can kind of reveal an opponent's hand or what they're thinking.
So filtering information in poker involves things like stack size, position, and even those subtle tells. But what about for us? It's not like we're at a poker table every day.
True, but think about it this way. What are the key pieces of information you need to make decisions in your field?
Oh, that's interesting.
And what are the signals that people are sending you both consciously and unconsciously that you might be missing? It's about being more aware of the information landscape around you and being able to cut through all the noise to focus on what really matters.
That makes a lot of sense. So filtering information is crucial. But the article says how others perceive you is also incredibly important. And this is where the idea of table image comes in.
Yeah, table image is fascinating because it shows how our actions and behaviors shape how others see us and how those perceptions then influence their decisions.
Okay, so in poker, your table image is basically how other players see you.
Right?
Are you a risk taker? Are you someone who plays it safe? Or are you completely unpredictable?
Right. And that image can be based on a combination of things like your betting patterns, how you act at the table, even how you dress.
Wow.
It's all about the story that you're projecting.
So how does that actually play out in a poker game? How does your table image affect what your opponents decide to do?
Well, let's go back to that story where the author has pocket aces.
Okay.
He decides to make a small bet after the first three community cards are dealt what's called the flop in poker.
Right. And that small bet ended up having a big impact on his opponent's perception.
Exactly. He later realized that that small bet might have made his opponent think he was weak, even though he had a strong hand.
Mm,
And that could have made his opponent more aggressive, maybe even putting him at a disadvantage.
wow. So even a small action can have this ripple effect because of how it shapes your table image.
It really can.
But how does this concept translate to situations outside of poker?
Well, how do you think you're perceived in your professional life or your personal life?
Oh, that's a good question.
Are you seen as a leader, a
Mhm.
collaborator, someone who takes risks or avoids conflict? And how does that then shape how people interact with you and respond to your ideas?
That's a really interesting question. I guess we don't always think about how others are interpreting our actions, but it's clearly important for our relationships and our goals.
It really is. And it's not just about being aware of how others perceive us, but being intentional about the image we're projecting.
Right. Do our actions line up with how we want to be seen?
Exactly. Are we communicating our intentions clearly? These are all important questions to think about.
Not just in poker, but in life.
Exactly. In all aspects of life.
Okay, so we've got filtering information and being aware of how we're perceived.
Mm.
The article then highlights a third lesson that's kind of counterintuitive. Decisions matter more than results.
Hmm.
And this is where things get really interesting.
It's fascinating because it challenges how we usually judge our decisions.
Yeah,
We tend to focus on did it work or not, but there's so much more to it.
right, because sometimes you make what seems like the right decision and things still don't go your way.
Exactly.
There's always chance, time, and all these things you can't control.
Yeah, so even a well thought out decision can lead to a negative result, at least in the short term.
Right.
For sure.
The article gives an example of a skilled poker player who makes a statistically sound bet,
Hmm.
but they still lose because the cards just didn't fall their way.
Right place, right time.
Exactly.
Sometimes you're the windshield, sometimes you're the bug.
It's true, and this isn't just poker.
Right, a business can make a great investment and still fail because the market changes.
Of course. Or you could make a healthy choice and still get sick.
Yep. It's recognizing that there's a difference between good decisions and just getting lucky.
So how do we reconcile this idea that a good decision doesn't always guarantee success?
Mm.
How do we shift our focus away from the short-term wins and losses?
It's about recognizing that we can't control every outcome, but we can control how consistent our decision-making process is.
Oh, that's good.
If we make decisions based on logic, careful analysis, really understanding the situation, that's what matters in the long run.
It's like building a solid foundation.
Right.
It takes time, but it makes you more resilient and adaptable when things get tough.
Exactly.
So instead of getting down on ourselves when a decision doesn't work out the way we want it, we should ask ourselves, did I make the best decision I could with the information I had at the time?
Exactly. And even if the outcome wasn't ideal, what did you learn from that experience?
Right.
How did it shape your thinking for future decisions?
Every decision is a learning opportunity.
Every decision, every outcome is a chance to learn and grow.
Okay, so we've got these three powerful lessons from poker. Filtering information, being aware of how we're perceived, and recognizing that decisions matter more than results. But how did these concepts actually play out in that high-stakes game?
Well, remember, our author is sitting there with pocket aces.
What many would consider the dream hand.
Right, but after the flop, he makes a decision that probably felt terrible at the time.
He folds.
Wait, he folds pocket aces.
He gives up what seems like a sure win.
That seems crazy. Why would he do that?
That's the million-dollar question. And to understand his decision, we need to go back to those lessons we've been talking about.
Okay.
He had to assess the information he had, consider how his actions were being perceived, and ultimately make a decision based on logic, even though it went against his gut.
So what information did he have that led him to make such a bold move? Was it something his opponent did, or was it something more subtle, like a shift in the energy of the game? Well, let's dive into that and see if we can figure out why he folded, because that might be the most valuable lesson of all. It was a bunch of things, really. Remember how we talked about tells?
Yeah.
How they can kind of give away a player's true intentions? Well, the author noticed a few things from his opponent that made him think he might have a stronger hand than expected.
So it wasn't just about the cards on the table. It was about his opponent's behavior. Those signs of strength or weakness.
Yeah, and that takes experience and intuition.
It must.
Experienced players, they develop this sharp sense of observation.
Hmm.
Like detectives looking for clues, they pay attention to how quickly their opponents bet, how they handle their chips, even their eye contact.
It's like they're piecing together a puzzle, trying to figure out their opponent's story
Right.
based on these tiny bits of information.
Exactly. And that's why poker is such a great analogy for decision-making in general.
Oh, yeah.
Because in life, just like in poker, we're always interacting with other people.
Right. Trying to understand what they're thinking.
Yeah. And making decisions with incomplete information.
So in this hand, what were some of those tells?
Mm-hmm.
What made him suspect his opponent might have something better than pocket aces?
Well, the article doesn't get into specifics about the tells,
Okay.
but it does say the author had been watching his opponent the whole game, noticing patterns in his betting and how he acted.
So he was building a profile in his mind,
Exactly.
trying to predict his next move.
And that's a crucial skill in poker, just like it is in business negotiations.
For sure. The more you know about the other person, what they want, their strengths and weaknesses.
The better decisions you can make.
Okay, so he's watching, picking up on these cues, and starting to feel like something's not right.
Yeah.
But he still has pocket aces. The best possible hand.
Right.
It must have been so hard to fold.
It was. And that's where discipline comes in.
Okay.
One of the hardest things in poker and in life is making decisions based on logic, even when your emotions are screaming at you to do something else.
Because in that moment, all that adrenaline, it's easy to get caught up in the excitement and ignore those doubts.
It's like that saying, sometimes you have to know when to hold them, know when to fold them.
Right?
But knowing when to fold, when to walk away from what seems like a good opportunity that takes serious discipline.
And in this case, it paid off. He made the tough call to fold those pocket aces, and it turns out his opponent did have a stronger hand.
3 of a kind.
Wow.
It was a perfect example of reading the situation, trusting his gut, and having the guts to make a hard decision.
Even though he technically lost the hand,
Right.
he made the right decision based on what he knew. It's a good reminder that sometimes the best moves are the ones that feel the worst in the moment.
Absolutely. And that brings us back to that idea. Decisions matter more than results. It's not always about winning or losing. It's about making the best choices for the long term.
So let's say you're facing a tough decision in your life. Maybe it's a career change, a big investment, a relationship issue. What are some things you can do to apply these poker ideas?
First, take stock of the information you have. What are the potential risks and rewards? Are there any biases or assumptions you're bringing to the table that might be clouding your judgment?
It's like doing your research,
Right.
gathering all the intel before you jump in.
Exactly. And then think about how your decision will be perceived by others. How will it affect your colleagues, your family, your friends?
That's horrible.
Are you communicating clearly so there are no misunderstandings?
We often forget that our decisions affect the people around us.
They really do.
It's important to think about that.
And finally, remember that good decisions don't always lead to instant success. There's always an element of chance.
Right.
So don't get discouraged if things don't work out right away. Trust the process, learn from your experiences, and keep refining your decision-making over time.
It's like building that solid foundation.
Exactly.
It takes time, but it makes you more resilient in the face of challenges.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So instead of beating yourself up when a decision doesn't work out the way you hoped, ask yourself, did I make the best decision I could with what I knew at the time?
Right. And even if the outcome wasn't perfect,
Right.
what did you learn? How did it shape your thinking for future decisions?
Every decision, every outcome is a chance to learn and grow.
This all comes back to that poker analogy. The game's about skill, but it's also about managing risk, reading people, being comfortable with uncertainty.
And those are all essential skills for life in general.
They really are.
So the next time you're facing a big decision, think like a poker player. Assess the situation, weigh the options, and make the call that feels right for you, even if it's the tough one.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. Let's recap those 3 lessons from poker.
Okay.
First, filtering information, focusing on the data that really matters.
Right. Don't get lost in the weeds.
Yeah.
Focus on what helps you make the best decision.
Second, that idea of table image, how others see us, can affect their actions.
It's about being aware of the story we're projecting and communicating clearly.
And finally, that decisions matter more than results.
Focus on the process, not just the outcome. And remember that good decisions don't always mean instant success.
It's about the long game, learning from experience, and getting better at making decisions.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, let's leave you with one final thought-provoking question straight from the article.
I like this.
When the pressure is on and you're facing a big decision, Will you know when to fold or when to go all in?
That's a good one.
Something to think about, Ray. Thanks for joining us on this journey into decision making. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.
Yeah, it really makes you think about those moments when you have to make a choice,
Yeah.
even when you don't know what's going to happen.
And it's not just those big life-changing decisions either. These poker ideas, they can apply to everyday stuff too.
So it's not just about betting big on a career or an investment. It's about those smaller choices
Yeah.
we make all the time.
Exactly. Like how you manage your time.
Oh, yeah.
Are you prioritizing your tasks based on how important and urgent they are? Or are you letting distractions sidetrack you?
It's like choosing which hand to play in poker, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to fold those less important tasks so you can focus on the ones that could really pay off.
Right. And think about how you talk to your colleagues, your family, your friends.
Oh, yeah. Communication is huge.
Are you getting your message across clearly? Are you considering their perspective and how they might react? Or are you letting things get messy with misunderstandings and conflict?
It's like being aware of your table image, right?
Exactly.
Making sure you're sending the right signals.
And even when you're tackling a tough project at work,
Okay.
you can use these poker principles.
So.
Before you jump in, take a minute to look at what resources you have, the obstacles you might face, the best strategy for reaching your goal.
So instead of just going on autopilot,
Right.
we should stop and think, okay, what am I trying to do? What information do I need? How do I want to come across in this situation? What are the potential risks and rewards?
Exactly. It's about being more aware of our actions, even the small ones.
Because over time, those small choices really add up.
They do. They shape our lives just as much as the big decisions.
It's like playing poker one card at a time. You might not win every round, but if you play smart, stay focused, and learn from your mistakes.
You're more likely to come out ahead in the long run.
And that's what I love about this. It's not about being perfect.
Right.
It's about embracing the challenge.
Learning and always trying to improve.
It's a really empowering way to look at making decisions. It's not about luck or knowing everything.
It's about having a system.
Right, a framework to help us deal with uncertainty.
With more confidence and a clearer vision.
And being willing to take risks to go all in when we believe in something, even if it might not work out.
Sometimes the best things come from those bold moves.
Well said. So I think we've given everyone a lot to think about today. As we wrap up this deep dive into poker lessons, let me just say this. May you always have the wisdom to know when to fold the courage, to know when to hold them, and the insight to make the best decisions in your own life, big and small.
And may you always approach life with that strategic mindset, thoughtful analysis, and determination that makes a true poker champion.
Thanks for joining us on this exploration of decision-making. Until next time, may the odds be ever in your favor.